Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this week's County Executives Weekly Media Briefing. I'm Nordea Lewis with the Office of Public Information. As a reminder, this briefing is being recorded. Joining us today is Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich, Kimberly Towson, Senior Administrator for Health and Human Services, Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, and we do have Chris Coughlin, who is the Director of the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, and he's here to answer any questions about, well, transportation. We will take all questions at the end, so please save your questions for the end. Over to you, County Executive. Take it away.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody, and hope you're in some place that's cool because it's very hot outside today, and it's actually at a dangerous level of heat. The county's under hypothermia alert and until 7 p.m. today, and it means the heat index has risen above 95 degrees again, and that makes everyone at risk for heat-related illnesses if they stay outside for too long without the proper precautions. We want residents to stay inside if they can. Anyone that needs to get out of the heat, you can go visit one of the county libraries, recreation, or senior centers during the normal operating hours. Also hope that, and to encourage residents to check on their neighbors, especially those who are older and may live alone. There's an elevated risk to people with breathing problems because today's air quality is considered moderate. People who are very sensitive to changes in outdoor air quality may want to limit their outside activities to avoid triggering issues. Last month, NASA announced that 2024 was likely going to be the warmest ever on record. And this is not a surprise. What is surprising is that this is not alarming more folks to the impacts of climate change. These climbing temperatures and the increase of risks to our individual health and community resiliency are the new normal, and it's only going to get worse from here. This is also the first week of school. I remember that going back to when I was a teacher, and then before that, having gone to school in Montgomery County, and it's definitely great to start the year over again. And it's exciting that the first week always was, I think, the most interesting week of the school year as everybody gets adjusted to their classes and their new friends and their old friends. So I hope everybody's having a great time back in school. I want to thank our Chief Executive Officer, Rich Battolino, for joining police officers and firefighters and other special guests at Pinecrest Elementary. I want to acknowledge the county's new superintendent, Dr. Thomas Taylor, for launching the school year with a lot of optimism. We already have begun to meet, and I look forward to increasing our collaborations and partnerships throughout the school year with MCPS. I'm very pleased that MCPS is addressing the cell phone issue in schools and social media usage with a new pilot program that's dubbed Away All Day Plan. Schools have up until next week to voluntarily sign up. I hope everybody voluntarily signs up. This program is going to restrict cell phone use to before and after classes begin. Students in other middle and high school campuses will continue to have access to their phones at lunch. High schoolers are also allowed to be on their phones between classes. This is a good start, and I hope it becomes policy throughout MCPS. Also announced with the cell phone policy is a new directive to block all social media sites like TikTok and Instagram throughout the MCPS web service. These are good first steps. We need students to focus on why they're at the classroom. As a former school teacher who was primarily in the classroom before these devices became ubiquitous, I can't imagine what it must be like to stand in front of such a distracted classroom. Actually, I can, because over the past couple of years, I've visited a couple of schools, and it was really disturbing to see a classroom and somebody trying to teach or talk to the students and watch kids playing games or sending messages on their cell phone and completely tuning themselves out of the class. It should not be that easy to distract yourself from class. I think having phones on in the classroom is a serious problem, and I hope that this pilot becomes reality for everybody, as I said before. Cell phones also offer easy access to social media sites, which students primarily communicate on. And we know that social media can be detrimental to someone's mental health. I think, it's probably detrimental to a lot of people's mental health, but adults at least have some capacity or some background knowledge to be able to tell the difference between some of the lies and some of the just nonsense that's posted on social media. Children don't have the same kind of experiences and don't have the same kind of filters. So it's much easier for them to believe things that are put on social media that are just outrageous and just nothing more than lies. Kids don't have the filter of the experience to understand these things aren't true in many cases. So children are at particular risk for being victims of inappropriate messaging that incites or encourages people to do bad or risky things, and messages, frankly, that are sometimes targeted to make you feel inadequate about yourself. Last year, this U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, called for a warning label on social media platforms. And statistics show that adolescents who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media face double the risk of anxiety and depression symptoms. Warning labels would not only provide greater awareness about the harmful impacts of social media on growing minds, it would also change behavior. That's what happened when warning labels were put on cigarettes. I'm glad that Montgomery County is part of a multi-jurisdictional lawsuit to hold social media sites accountable for their addictive natures, and MCPS and the Maryland Attorney General have all filed similar suits. Currently, this suit is going through pretrial motions and processes. Like life as a teenager is always hard and difficult. It's probably one of the most difficult chapters in a person's life sometimes. This is a chart that was included in our lawsuit filing of feelings of sadness and hopelessness in our youth. This chart from the CDC clearly demonstrates how much more difficult it's become to be young just over the past decade since social media has taken root in our lives. The increases in the rates for both genders are concerning, but the greater impact is on young women, and it's very alarming. The fact that nearly 6 out of 10 young females are experiencing persistent sadness and loneliness is pretty shocking. Some other statistics that were cited in our lawsuit include the share of children seriously considering attempting suicide increased 11% from 2011 to 21, up to 22% of all high school students. The share who created a suicide plan increased to 18%, and from 2007 to 2018, suicide rates among youth aged 10 to 24 in the United States increased by 57%. In 2018, suicide was the second leading cause of death for youth aged 10 to 24. And from 2007 to 2016, emergency room visits for youth aged 5 to 17 rose 117% for anxiety disorders, 44% for mood disorders, and 40% for attention disorders. These are pretty, I think, alarming statistics, and I don't think there's much doubt that social media plays a role in much of this. President Joe Biden, in his 2022 State of the Union, called for us to hold social media accountable for the national experiment they're conducting on our children for profit. I'm glad that our county, our school system, and our state are pursuing this legally. These lawsuits make a difference. In 2019, this county sued e-cigarette maker Juul in a class action lawsuit with other jurisdictions. Due to that this school year, we will have $2 million of investment to install vape detectors in all county high school and to address a common complaint about vape and drug use during school. So that's an example of how we benefited from a lawsuit to help minimize the use of vapes and other things during the school day. The statistics don't lie. Social media is just as dangerous to our children's health as cigarettes and e-cigarettes, and the companies that profit from this need to be held accountable. This is also at the beginning of the school. We're hypersensitive to school safety and school traffic safety in specific. And if you're not aware, there's this special focus on traffic around schools. To start the year, police are looking for drivers who speed, run red lights, and do not stop for pedestrians. We will also continue to rely on our automated traffic enforcement unit, which monitors speed cameras in and around schools. In addition to that, all school buses are now equipped with cameras to catch and find drivers illegally passing stop school buses. Those tickets result in fines and could cost the driver up to 3 points on their driver's license. According to MCPD, there were more than 48,000 drivers captured by school bus cameras illegally passing a stop school bus last year. Our Department of Transportation has been helping improve safety training and traffic safety through extreme outreach efforts and by developing the Safe Routes to School program. It reviews the school walk area for each MCPS school, with about 15 schools reviewed for safety improvements each year. This summer, safe crossing infrastructure, such as crosswalks, median refuge islands, and curb ramps were added to Sally K. Ride, Judith Resnick, and Pinecrest Elementary Schools. Herbert Hoover and Earl B. Wood and Francis Scott Key Middle Schools were also upgraded. I want to thank Dr. Taylor for helping prioritize traffic safety, saying MCPS will be providing, quote, a higher level of customer service, unquote, for those who have transportation issues, and they are manning a transportation hotline. The MCPS transportation hotline number is 240-740-7790. We want to make sure you have that information to share with your audiences. So hopefully that'll be part of whatever stories you put out there. This weekend, 4 transit stations along the Red Line will be back open to the public. It's been a long wait for commuters who rely on trains coming through Glenmont, Wheaton, Forest Glen, and Silver Spring. I want to thank everyone for their patience and the construction crews who've been working throughout the summer to meet the August 31st deadline to limit these disruptions. The Tacoma station was closed for only a month, but has since reopened. The closures allow crews to build part of the new Purple Line mezzanine, and they also do rehab. They've done a lot of rehab on the Red Line, and I saw a list of all the projects they'd done. It was pretty substantial. Thousands of feet of rail were replaced, among the other improvements, and lots of concrete was restored and track signals replaced along the route. I'm glad that this work is being completed on time, and I appreciate WMATA's efforts and partnership throughout this disruption to commuters and all those who count on the Red Line for transportation. We appreciate that the state has made a decision to continue the bus-only lanes. These are only 7 miles of a state road in the county to evaluate the impact now that the metro stations have reopened. The pilot program will extend through at least December, thanks to an agreement with the Maryland Department of Transportation and WMATA. COVID is still with us. And so today's update, vaccines are the cornerstone of a COVID-19 prevention policy. And I'm happy to learn that very soon some new vaccines will be available. Last week, the FDA approved and granted emergency use authorization for new COVID vaccines that correspond to the KP2 strain. The rule of thumb this time is that if you've not had a COVID-19 vaccine within the last 2 months, then you need to get the updated shot now. COVID-19 vaccines should be an annual flu shot to your arm in order to have the best protection possible. You could compare the need for them to the need for a flu shot, but you also have to realize that COVID continues to be a much more lethal illness than the flu. Even though vaccines have been developed for both, some more people still die from getting COVID than who die from getting the flu. Common sense prevention methods should also be regularly used, especially now that school's back in session. So it's important for every member of your family to remember to wash their hands regularly and stay home if they are sick. And I've got a bunch of friends staying home. This has been going on for a couple of weeks. Everybody got COVID from crowded conditions, it seems. And I wish everybody a speedy recovery. On Thursday, we honored the lives lost to overdoses as part of International Overdose Awareness Day. Last year, we saw a surge in overdoses in our youth that prompted an elevated concern among families in our community who are desperate for answers. In addition to increasing education, we've been able to share Narcan with more communities and people. The anti-overdose drug has helped save lives, yet opioids and fentanyl still remain dangerous. Tomorrow night's ceremony at the Executive Office Building in Rockville will honor overdose victims. It will start with a resource fair at 5, and then the Montgomery County goes Purple Recovery Month event begins at 6:30. They will be followed by a candlelight vigil at 7:30. So for more information, you can visit Montgomery Goes Purple, all one word, .org. MontgomeryGoesPurple.org. Finally, on Monday, we stopped to honor workers throughout the nation for Labor Day. Labor Day celebrates the incredible contributions labor unions and everyday Americans have made to our country, promoting fair wages and safe workplaces. Specifically, I want to acknowledge and thank the Montgomery County government workforce for their service, care, and professionalism in serving our residents. And I want to especially appreciate the collaboration and partnership we have with our labor unions who represent many of our workers. And I'd be remiss not to mention that, during COVID, our people were at work, but they needed to be in person. They needed to get a job done. Our people were out there. And special thanks to all our first responders who had to man the front lines of the county. I'm also proud with the support of our labor unions, Montgomery County leads the state and are among one of the highest in the nation in terms of minimum wage. And with the costs on the rise and rent still a struggle for too many families, it's time to once again look at elevating the minimum we pay our workers. The advantage of having strong unions is that they've helped countless families move into the middle class. They fought for and won protections from long work days, long work weeks, child labor, and a myriad of other things. Many families benefit from health care protections and pensions that can be attributed to the work of the unions. Unions have made life better, not just here and around, but around the world. And earlier generations that fought for the right to organize and belong to a union had to overcome the oligarchs of their time, the police and the military that were used to suppress demonstrations and to break strikes, and the murder of union leaders to silence their voices. And still today, there are major companies that use every tactic legally possible, and some not so legal, to prevent workers from organizing. The continued anti-labor practices depress wages and the standard of living for many Americans who go to work every day to put food on the table and to pay rent. We as a society have a wealth of public policies and assistance programs that help make ends meet for these people, programs which wouldn't be necessary if workers earned enough money to support their families. Effectively, anti-labor companies unload the true costs of labor onto us in the public sector who have to create policies and programs to mitigate the impacts of those unfair anti-labor practices. Labor Day will celebrate the dedication to building a society where more people share in the wealth that is created by labor. I grew up with parents who reminded me pretty much constantly that you could stack all the gold in the world at the entrance of a coal mine, and not a single ounce of coal will come out of that mine without the human labor, the miners who dig it out. And I thought that kind of captures the best as possible, that money alone and wealth alone does not produce products and does not advance society. It is human beings who do the work that ultimately make it possible for us to turn on our lights, sleep in comfortable beds, and ride transportation to get ourselves to and from work. All that brought to you by working people. And capital plays a role, but it does not play the only role. And speaking of work, I'd like to invite others on this call to provide any updates before we take your questions. That way you can work on some news stories. So I'll turn it back over to Nordea and whoever goes next.
Thank you so much, County Executive. Do we have any health updates, Kimberly?
Good afternoon. No, there are no health updates for this week's briefing. Thank you.
Okay, great. If no one else has anything to add, all right, I think we are open for questions.
I think Chris Conklin's on. Chris, were you going to make some comments?
Just reinforcing some of the things you said, County Executive. We're very happy to have the Red Line stations back in service starting this weekend, and look forward to monitoring the performance of the bus lanes under normal traffic conditions with normal transit service. Additionally, to reinforce the message about taking care as a driver or a pedestrian accessing our public schools. Enforcement obviously plays a big role, but each of us has a responsibility to be an effective and safe operator of a motor vehicle or to be aware of our surroundings when we're walking or biking to and from school. So thank you for highlighting those items in your address.
All right, thanks so much, Chris. We are now open for questions. Reporters, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Any questions? Dominique? Or Dominic?
No, you got it right the first time, Dominique. I just had a quick question, County Executive. When we talk about this policy that MCPS is implementing in reference to the cell phone policy, do you think it's a step in the right direction to try to set up a policy where potentially phones will not be allowed in the classrooms, given the fact that we've had plenty of distractions, or they have plenty of distractions already?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got enough evidence of it being distracting, and you could probably get any number of teachers to testify about how it's been distracting, to have just gone all out and just said we're banning them. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the pilot. I would be surprised if classrooms without phone access were more disruptive than classrooms that did have phone access. So this is one of those times that I think we could have dispensed with the study and gone to making a decision. But we're making a study. It's a step in the right direction. And I hope that, we conclude the study quickly and we move to making it not possible. I know there's some parents who are concerned about reaching their kids. There's a way that's always worked when I was in elementary school in the 50s and worked through the rest of my school life. Parents called the office, then you'd hear a little voice on the loudspeaker saying, well, so-and-so, please come down to the office. You have a phone call from your parent or something. There are ways to communicate. Nobody says, and we've never had policies that didn't allow parents to communicate with their kids, but no one needs to have a phone on when they're in a classroom. No one needs to be playing games or texting or looking at social media when they're in a classroom. That ought to be unacceptable. And it was disappointing that this was not done earlier, because I don't know anybody who ever taught in the classroom thought it would be appropriate to let kids play on their phones where you're trying to teach. Sends the wrong message.
Thank you.
Jenny?
Hi, hello. Sorry, I've been having some technical issues today. Scott, I think, knows that.
You're on mute.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to my phone and I don't know what I'm doing clearly. I had reached out about Scott and Earl are aware. Earl might already have some things to share. We've had a number of residents reach out to us saying that they're having difficulty accessing 911 operators when they call 911. But frequently they're on hold for several minutes or they're sent to a instructional voicemail. I just wanted to ask, is your office working on this? What's going on here? Why are people experiencing this?
So I know Earl's worked on this. Earl, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So we were aware of specific complaints, and when we looked into those specific complaints, we see that the individual who we're aware of, and you may be aware of others, they said they were in queue for several minutes. We look at the automated system, we can see that they were in the queue for 44 seconds before they dropped off on one occasion, and 52 seconds on another occasion before they dropped off. In both cases, they got the automated call back, which automatically tries to call them back. And in one case they didn't answer, in the other case they did answer and were transferred appropriately. Generally speaking, though, there's a few things I want to say about 911. Number one, for the month of July, our average answer time was 12 seconds, meaning if you called 911, your call was answered on average within 12 seconds. There were 3 days in July where the average was 15 seconds, but obviously that means there were other days when it was below 12. So the average for the month was 12 seconds. There were 3 days where it was 15 seconds. We try and have it be under 10 seconds, and so we do need to have some improvements. We're still about 30% vacancy rate in the 911 call takers, but compare that to 6 months ago when we're at 42% vacancy. You can already see we're making progress. We added a defined benefit pension to the call takers, and so obviously will, the communication specialists that benefit is paying dividends. We're also including 911 call takers amongst the recruitment firm hiring that we did with the police department. They're including the 911 call takers in that effort as well. and we're already seeing benefits. I think we have 21 call takers currently in the training course right now, that which we expect will have a good difference to what we see. As a general principle, 911 centers across the country are facing really challenging times, and number one, it's a hard job, but number two, with the proliferation of cell phones, any car accident in Montgomery County, no matter how serious, we get 10 to 30 people calling 911 to report that incident with their cell phones. That ties up the call takers and puts people who are calling for other incidents at the same time in a queue to be answered, while the call takers are sort of working their way through the 10 to 30 people calling concurrently about the same incident that's occurring. We also see that, on average in a month, we get about 1,500 calls a day to 911 and about 700 calls a day to the non-emergency line. Based on what we see, those numbers should be inverted, meaning there are a lot of people calling 911 who really they should be calling the non-emergency line to report what they're reporting. And those 911 calls that are being taken up by people who are calling with non-emergent issues are delaying the response that the people calling 911 who really need 911 get. And so we're working on some additional solutions using AI. For example, we're trying to set up an automated tow, like people calling for a tow of a vehicle. We're trying to set up an automated line for a tow call. That's an option that we're looking at that will handle about 30,000 calls a year that we get for towing vehicles. We're also looking at, having alarm calls go not through the 911 system, having go a separate system. And then obviously I think Arlington County recently did an AI-based non-emergency call line answering service. We as a region are all paying attention to what they learned from that process and figuring out ways that we can replicate that in here in Montgomery County. And finally, this actually came with the drone program. We got access to a system called Live 911, where actually our police officers in their cruiser or their supervisors can actually hear the 911 calls as they're coming in. And so that actually is another way that we're trying to integrate a new service that will allow faster responses, even while the 911 call system is taking information to try and expedite responses, not just the call taking process. So certainly able to answer any follow-up on any of those things I brought up, but we need to improve. We need to get under 10 seconds for sure. But I think that it is rare that people experience these queues given our averages for any month that you look at in the month of, or in the calendar year 24 or before.
That was all very helpful. Thank you. I might follow up with you personally later, but thank you.
Not a problem. Absolutely.
Judith?
I'd like to go back to the cell phone issue in schools for just a moment, if I may. Years ago, the chief of police of the city of Rockville and I were invited to shadow students at Wooten High School for the day, and the chief's cell phone went off, and the kids razzed him nonstop for hours about, he gets to have his cell phone on and we don't, because at that time, students were not allowed to have their cell phones on in school. Did that policy change on purpose? Was it just an organic change that kids began using their cell phones? How did we get to this point in time where it's become a problem?
Because I think people were very bad at drawing boundaries. I'm a former school teacher, and I love kids. I think they're great, but they're kids, and they don't always understand why they're in school and what the importance of what they're doing is. And if you allow them to indulge whatever they want to do, you're not going to get really good results out of it all the time. I mean, there's a big difference between a police chief whose job, is not just to be in the moment where he is with kids in this case, but whose job is to be able and ready to respond to any crisis or any issue that happens around the county. Yeah, he's going to have a phone, and he's going to may have to interrupt what he's doing in a minute to answer the phone. That's not what kids are doing. Kids are using it to play and distract themselves. We never should have let the genie out of the bottle. We should have said it's not for use for personal entertainment during the school day. I guess if kids want to bring it there and park it, and then pick it up at the end of the day and park it, that's fine. But we just didn't take it seriously, And I don't think we in general took social media seriously. I mean, the idea that you've got media that can go out there and has no obligation to tell you that the thing they just showed you was a lie, or the story you just read is, absolutely untrue. We seem to have lost all sense of filters or propriety. And I think it puts everybody at risk when you don't know what the truth is or what the truth isn't. And you especially expose young people to it who don't have the wisdom of experience, at least to make some judgments about whether what you're watching is nonsense or not. I think we let the door open way too far. That's my personal opinion. And I was a fairly rebellious kid in school, but there are limits in what we rebelled against. The rules for us were you had to wear socks, you had to wear a belt, you couldn't wear jeans. Trivial stuff that didn't mean that you were going to damage your ability to pay attention in school. But allowing kids to use cell phones crosses a line, I think, where it's not good for education.
Thank
Period.
Can I add something here? As a, I've got a middle schooler and a high schooler, and I think one observation I would make is that we've really sent some mixed messages to kids in the schools, and that is, my daughter actually had one teacher who would routinely use QR codes to give assignments, and therefore the kids who had cell phones would actually benefit to be able to take the QR code off the screen and they'd have their assignment with their cell phone. We had another teacher who would actually provide extra credit to the students who would turn their cell phones into the front of the classroom at the beginning of the lecture. So the kids would have it, they put it up in the front and they put it in this little bin. And if they put it in the bin, they got extra credit for the class. And so obviously, like, that was my high school age daughter. I can't remember whether it was high school or middle school, but that was sending some really mixed messages to the students. And as a parent, what I've heard largely from other parents is parents want to be able to access their children if something emergent happens, either at the school or in their family that they need to notify the kid about. But I think, as the county executive alluded to, that can be achieved without actually having kids with their devices in the classroom utilizing them. And so what I would say generally is, obviously as a parent, I'm incredibly supportive of limiting cell phone access. And it gets even more complicated because with Apple Watches and other things now, you can not have your phone out and still be able to text and do other things. And so this is a really complicated space that MCPS is endeavoring into, and it'll be interesting to see how that gets dealt with over the next several years. But obviously, I think distractions in the classroom are something we've got to minimize, and I think that can be achieved without necessarily preventing parents from being able to send their kids messages between classes at lunchtime, whenever more appropriate times for cell phone use might be, but allow them to focus on their coursework while they're in the classroom.
Thanks very much.
Are there any other questions? Anything going once, twice? Okay, I think we're good. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week, and we will see you next time. Anything else you want to add, County Executive, before we close out?
No, thank you very much. Hope everybody has a cooling week. I think we peak in bad news today, and then it seems to decline a little bit. And next week looks really good.
All right, we'll see everyone next time.